I love Gandhi's quote, be the change that you want to see. I spent a lot of time after my mom passed, just, like, Lord, why did this happen to me? And kind of feeling down and out and not really having a very optimistic view of the future. And then dealing with, family folks who are trying to take our land and stuff. And it was a very trying time. And so I started trying to be the person that I wanted my family to be, that I wanted my friends to be. And it really changed the way that I looked at life. It's kind of the glass half full or half empty, the way that you look at stuff. So I just get up every day and try to be the change that I want to see in the world. And hopefully that rubs off and somebody sees my light and like, okay, I see what she's doing there. Yeah.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. It is an honor to have Scherrie L. Prince on the show today. Speaking about something that is really important that a lot of times we forget about as business owners and entrepreneurs. How do we make sure we're protecting our assets properly if something should happen to us? So first of all, Scherrie, thank you for being on Your Brand Amplified.
Thanks for having me.
I want to hear a little bit about your backstory. I know you are both a lawyer and you have an MBA. What prompted you to go on that path?
I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible because it is a very winding road that got me here. But primarily, I grew up on a farm. My mother passed away when I was 16. And so my brother and I just we bounced around for a while with different relatives. But at one point, I lived with my grandparents on their farm. And, lots of love, got the entire experience of, picking peas, cucumbers, butter beans, all those things we do in Mississippi. And when they passed away, they did not have an estate plan. They did not have a will or a trust or any document or set of instructions for what to do with their 150 plus acre farm. And so fast forward with my mom, predeceasing them, my brother and I received her portion of their assets. And just, you really don't know family folk until there's money or something involved. And that's what really spurred my interest in asset protection and estate planning.
Huh. So you learned early on that this is something that people really need to think about, and that helped propel you. I had an experience where my father passed away. It was completely unexpected, and he kind of had a will, but he had pieces of paper here and there. He didn't have everything in one place. So we would think, oh, he has an insurance policy. We can use that for my little brother to go to school. Oh no, he let it lapse. Or, it was really hard to untangle exactly what was there and what wasn't there and what we needed to take care of. So I've had personal experience with this as well in knowing, gosh, he didn't really have a systems and he wasn't an entrepreneur, right, in the same way, but it was still important for him to understand.
Yeah. And, one thing that people need to know, you do not have to own a business to have a will or a trust. You still need some sort of guidance for what to do, even burial plans, in the event that you pass away. One of the biggest things that I hear all the time is that, well, I don't have a lot of assets. I just have a home or a car, or I don't have any money in the bank. I can't afford it. Well, you can't afford not to. One example that I give folks is, if you have minor children, do you have a guardianship designation set aside so that the state will know what happens to your children? If maybe you and your spouse are in a joint accident, or maybe you're a single parent, what happens to your kids and who takes care of them?
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to ask that question about what if you don't think you have a lot of assets, you're building your business. So can you talk about the legal side of making sure you have a trust, that you have a will set up, but also your business?
Right. And so one thing I tell folks, and we just start here at the basics, if you do not have a plan, the state that you live in has a plan for you. Every single state has a plan for what happens if somebody passes away without a will or a trust. And usually your heirs will get a predetermined portion of your estate. Now, that's not always terrible, but what happens is now they have to go pay an attorney. And we love to hear those, to see those people come in with those big checks. You have to go pay an attorney to change the title over to the house if you don't do that ahead of time. You have to go pay an attorney to get the titles for property, to go make sure that your interest in the family business, if you have one, is properly transferred. So there are so many things that you can do in advance that are very low cost before you pass away that really make your passing more of a homegoing so that people aren't crying because they can't pay for the burial. They're celebrating because you're in a better place.
I love that homegoing instead of passing. Now, on the same vein of entrepreneurs or people who own businesses, if you have an LLC or you have a C corp or an S corp, even if you're the only person, how do you make sure that that passes to a family member if they're not an officer in your organization? And I'm sure that can also be complex to unweave.
Well, if you are a single member LLC, different states have different provisions for how your business interests are handled. In some states, they give you a certain number of days, and if the interest is not properly transferred or you don't have a will or a trust, then you have to treat it like someone who does not have a will, and you have to go through the probate process. Now, a business is an asset just like a car or a house or any other, piece of personal property. So my advice is to make sure that you have the disposition of your business interests inside of a will or a trust. Mm. It gets a little tricky if you're married or if you have a multi-member LLC. So, that's thing number one. I'm sorry, thing number two. Thing number one was the passing of my grandparents. So that really got me in this area. But thing number two, my very first business. Wow. Great business, was profitable. But one day my partner's wife walked in and said, "Hey, I'm your new partner." I don't know what happened the night before, but she just came and decided that she and I were going to run the business. And I was like, "Lady, I don't know you. And I definitely do not want to be in business with you." But the way that our business was set up was on a handshake. We literally did not have a single piece of paper that governed, the business, dissolution, transfer of shares. And I was super green. I was 21 years old. And from that point going forward, I'm like, never again. So there are so many formalities. It's not just, opening up a business with Secretary of State and getting a tax identification number. There are so many things you need to put in place to make sure that your shares pass and someone cannot separate you from your business.
Mm-hmm. What about creative endeavors? For instance, this podcast, it does monetize. Obviously, if I'm not hosting it, I can't do any more episodes, but could still monetize on the previous episodes. So how would I handle making sure that my daughter is a beneficiary?
Oh, sure. So hopefully you've trademarked, any branch you have copyrights, any sort of intellectual property. Those are assets and they could pass, with your will, or if you want to set them up in a trust. And so in perpetuity, you have beneficiaries who are designated to receive income from the residual episodes. And so you just treat it like any other asset, but you have to take the first step and protect it. You have to put a moat around all of your assets. And so the moat looks different depending on the type of asset it is. And with intellectual property and things like that, you're going to have to look at your trademarks, copyrights, if there's an invention, patents, things like that, and you can pass those the exact same way.
That's really amazing. I'd love to hear examples from your life working in this field from other people who you've seen it make such a big difference in their lives to have this protection in place.
So one of my more memorable clients was actually a family, and it was a family business. They own a small gas station / grocery store. You can come and get a sandwich, buy groceries. They also had an apartment complex and some other things. Well, the mom passed away, and she was the face of the business. She was the only name on the bank account, and just around town, people generally knew that it was a family business, but she handled everything, and everyone else pretty much got a check. Well, she passed away suddenly. All of the funds for the company were frozen. The bank would not let anybody else transact on the account. And so we had to go through the process of doing minute meetings, transferring shares, setting up an operating agreement, and just really putting some formalities together so that no matter who was the manager or members of that LLC, that the proper people knew that they had the authority to conduct business and for things to just keep going as they needed to. And so, that's just one example of people that, you may have an LLC, but you're running it like a sole proprietorship. And in the end, it can really halt your business and affect the way that you're able to move forward.
Yeah. Wow. That's really sad, but I'm glad that you're able to step in and help them out and help them create a new structure. And hopefully that business thrived, even though there was a different face on the business.
Yeah. And you know what? What's really amazing is that there's so many things that you can do before you even start your business. One thing that I counsel entrepreneurs on I call it the entrepreneur's blueprint. And before you even open your business, I'm going to borrow the phrase from Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. What does your exit look like? Are you someone who maybe has worked 20, 25 years and you've retired from one job? Now you're taking your retirement and putting it into a business. What would you like to see this business do at the point that you don't want to work day to day in the business? Or do you want to pass it to a family member? Would you like for someone to purchase the business from you at 2, 3, 4 times the value of the business? So we just kind of work backwards. And those conversations, with an attorney or a business consultant before you even start your business are invaluable. And they don't cost a lot, but they save a lot of headache down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. What about AI? This is obviously a big topic with every industry right now. I've talked to people who've been interns at law firms or over the summer and said, oh, well, I'm doing all the research by hand, looking up in the books, but next year it'll all be digitized, right? And so there's a lot of things that people wonder about AI, and I'd love to hear how it affects the world of law and estate planning. Is AI going to take over and create forms for people? What, is that a positive? Is that a negative? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think AI is a tool, just like a hammer is a tool for a carpenter, a water hose is a tool for a firefighter, and you just have to know the best way to use that tool. So as it relates to I think in terms of getting an outline, maybe doing a rough draft of a document, it is a great tool, but you cannot replace the human component because AI can't think like a human. I'm going to give you another example. So I have a client who owns lots of real estate. And what some people do, they'll say, okay, I'm a real estate investor. I'm going to put every single thing that I own this real estate in one LLC. Well, this client had a default judgment. And what does that do? A default judgment covers all of your assets, or any judgment will cover all of your assets, in the name of that company. So now you have this one piece of property that is encumbering every single thing that person owns until they liquidate and or pay the judgment. And what you do with AI, you can take AI and tell it to put together a motion, but AI cannot think about a solution for that client.
Boom.
It takes the human component. So no, I don't think that it will ever replace us, but I think it is a great tool. And the things that I was able to do to help that client resolve that situation, these are things that AI just can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have certain experience and you have to, know certain laws. And then it's about relationships as well. A good attorney makes good grades and knows the law. A great attorney knows the judge. So does AI know the judge?
That's a great example. I feel like a lot of times, even in my own situation, we get excited about starting a business and we just start it and we don't think about all of the considerations we need to put into place. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that the importance of having the right team, the right people to ask in place before you need them. And that's another place where I can see you coming in to help.
Yeah. So part of what I do, because I'm a licensed attorney, but I can only give you legal advice in an area that I'm licensed in. I also do asset protection coaching, which does not require a license, just a skill set. And the way that I function with my clients, I'm kind of like the quarterback or their money team. So, Scherrie, who's on the money team? Well, you should have an insurance agent on your money team. And this is probably somebody that you have an existing relationship with. So you start looking for people on your team, look, to people that you're already engaging for services. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. And I tell folks, if you have a car, you're probably paying a premium for that car, insurance premium, or commercial building, you're paying general liability insurance. See if this person can come in and meet with your other advisors, like an attorney, a financial planner, but you don't have to spend a lot of money. You just got to get the people on your money team talking to one another.
Nice. Yeah, because I've had that situation where I hired the wrong person to handle that side of my business, and I definitely paid the price for it because it was also somebody who's a friend and didn't necessarily have the experience that I thought the person had.
And honestly, one size does not fit all. I have a master class that I teach a couple of times a year. And part of the master class, we go over questions so you can actually interview your service providers. So if you are someone who has a business and you provide XYZ services, well, these are the types of questions that you ask an attorney about your business to see if they're knowledgeable enough to give you the kind of counsel that you need to be successful. Because if my chest is hurting, I'm not going to go to a foot doctor.
Right.
And,
No.
and it's no, it's nothing that I'm saying that is anti attorney or anti anybody. It's just that you have to make sure you go to the right specialist for what you need.
Yeah. And you can help identify and ask those, make sure that people have the right list of questions and they have the right people to go to.
Right.
I love that. And you have a blueprint you talked about a little bit earlier for entrepreneurs. I know we're going to link to that on your website in the show notes, but will you tell us a little bit more about what that process looks like?
Yeah, it's pretty much a decision tree. And so, even if you're going to the store to buy a dress, you're thinking, okay, does the dress need to be blue or black? Is it formal? Is it informal? Well, the same thing for the entrepreneur's blueprint. We ask questions like, does your business require anonymity? If it requires anonymity, you may need to be in a state like Nevada, Wyoming, or Delaware. Is your business e-commerce or is it brick and mortar? You have different considerations because depending on the type of business that you have, it may be more advantageous to be in a state that does not have an income tax or has a lower sales tax, depending on what you're trying to do. And if you are an individual who does not have a business, but you may have a blended family, believe it or not, people are getting married 2 and 3, maybe sometimes 4 and 5 times. So there are considerations for blended families.
Wow.
And you just kind of go through the decision tree. And by the time that you're done, you will have a blueprint for the types of questions that you need to ask your professionals to give you the best advice to be successful and build a moat around your assets.
Nice. I think I'm going to have to recommend this to even my students at the university who are thinking about their own businesses.
Yay!
Yeah. I love this tool. What are some other things that we need to think about? I mean, I'm really also loving your storytelling and hearing about different examples that you have where people have had to make different considerations, because that way I can see myself, or my listeners or viewers can also see themselves in one of the examples.
Okay, so here's one thing that, I think it's a very needed conversation, but people don't actually go down this road a lot because it's touchy. Blended families. I have one client that came in, she was wife number 3. And so husband passed away, did not have a will. And in her mind, she's like, okay, well, I'm his wife. I get everything. Okay, well, he was married to wife number 1 more than 10 years. It's going to affect Social Security. Wife number 2, there were still assets that were jointly titled with wife number 2. There was an insurance policy that wife number 1 still had that she was paying, and she knew about it, but she kept paying the premiums because she was the beneficiary. And so there were all these things that were never properly transferred so that wife number 3 would be comfortable in the event of husband's death. And so, it was a sad situation, but it's also a cautionary tale. So I share with people that you need to minimally have a simple will, because what happens when a mom, a stepmom, or a stepdad comes into a situation and there are children, and you grow up with these children and you treat them just like they're your natural children, you pass away without a will, they are not entitled to anything by law, but you would like to leave them something. So after you do your initial planning, I encourage people to treat it like a wellness visit. And at least once a year, call your attorney, call your financial advisor, and just do a check-in. Say, hey, I just had a new grandbaby. What do I need to do? Or I'm getting a divorce. My daughter's getting married. I have someone going to college. And so just do a check-in and update your plan.
Nice. Yeah. And in terms of the plan, we talked about AI a little bit and how that can help you just create an outline. I know there are companies like Trust and Will and different companies you can find online to help you draft things up. And I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, because you cannot give necessarily legal advice or act as a lawyer for people outside of your jurisdiction,
Yeah.
right? But you can act as a coach and help lead them to, then do you recommend online tools? Do you recommend maybe a lawyer that you know in their area?
Yeah. And I do have a network of people that I recommend people to all the time
Yeah.
because it really is about collaboration and cooperation. It's working with people that have skill sets that you don't have and resources in other places. I will tell you that there is a place for templates, for do-it-yourself tools. There is a place for that, but there is no replacement for sound
Right.
legal and or financial advice.
Yeah.
So if you are someone who feels that you do not have the financial ability to engage a professional, then yes, I would start with a template because you need something. Definitely start with the template. But as you are able to do more, I would say just engaging a professional because what happens is there's certain magic language that you have to put into these documents to make sure that the intent is there for what you want to happen. And when you buy a template, the person who's selling that template, they have to make it as broad as possible to appeal to the largest number of people. So what does that do? That dilutes some of the very fine writing that is in some of the laws and legislation across all, the different 50 states. And they make it to where sometimes people in other countries can also use it, depending on where you're purchasing it from. So you just want to be careful, but definitely if you don't have a plan, or even if you don't have time, you may have the finances, but not time, definitely start there.
And I want to ask, how do you help people take the emotion out of it? Because these are all talking about money can get people really emotional, having to make these decisions. So, what are some ways that you have found that help create more of a sense of ease and peace when people are talking about money?
I like to be as brutally honest as possible. And even though I know you can't tell, but I'm a very humorous person. Um, no, but I have to just let people know, if you get hit by a bus, your baby doesn't have a mom or a dad, what happens? So we need to get this plan together. You give them the upside and you really equip them with all the information they need to make an informed decision because anybody can make a decision, but they really need to make an informed decision. So I try to hit people with as many facts as possible, as many scenarios, and not just, possibilities, like real things that I've seen happen to people. And it's all about building that moat. So start with the information and just giving them the knowledge they need to move forward, but also letting them know that these are real things that happen. They may be unfortunate, but you can always put a plan in place that will, make your family as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Is there any other word of wisdom that you want to share to the audience just to really hammer it home, or any last case study you want to talk about?
Let's talk about the cost of inaction.
Right.
What is it costing you to do nothing? Look around. It could be every single thing, your house, your car, and your peace of mind. If you have loved ones who depend on you for anything, the last thing that you want to do is leave them in an uncertain position. So make a plan. And if you don't make a plan, the state that you live in has a plan for you. It's really simple. Just get started.
Awesome. And Scherrie, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, words that help you get up every day that keep you inspired?
Yes. I love Gandhi's quote, be the change that you want to see. I spent a lot of time after my mom passed, just, like, Lord, why did this happen to me? And kind of feeling down and out and not really having a very optimistic view of the future. And then dealing with, family folks who are trying to take our land and stuff. And it was a very trying time. And so I started trying to be the person that I wanted my family to be, that I wanted my friends to be. And it really changed the way that I looked at life. It's kind of the glass half full or half empty, the way that you look at stuff. So I just get up every day and try to be the change that I want to see in the world. And hopefully that rubs off and somebody sees my light and like, okay, I see what she's doing there. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that quote. And you really are an inspiration. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I loved hearing your real life case studies, situations that we all need to be thinking about. And it is time to take action. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go to the link in the show notes, get that blueprint, find out what your next steps should be, And I'm already thinking, oh, I have a trust and will, but now I need to go back through, make sure it's relevant to today because it's been a
Exactly.
few years since I looked at it. Well,
It'd
this
be
is fantastic. I just really appreciate you, Scherrie, and thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their insights and help you make your life a little bit better every day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.